You asked for this. Thousands of you. In the comments. In the DMs. Saying you weren't ready to let Ruth and Ortensio go. Saying you needed to know what came next. So here it is. Part 2. And I promise you, it's worth the wait. Now if you're new here, if this is your first time hearing their names, do yourself a favor. Pause. Go to the description. Click the link to part 1. Watch that first. Then come back. Because what's about to happen will hit different when you know how far they've already come. For everyone else, let's continue. 6 months of peace. That's what they had. 6 months in the Connecticut cottage with Zia Lucia. 6 months of quiet mornings and long nights and learning what it felt like to not be afraid. Then Chisholm came. Chisholm Lucia Minaldo. Chima for short. Born on a Tuesday morning while snow fell outside the window. 7 pounds 4 ounces. Her mother's eyes. Her father's stubbornness. Ortensio held her like she was made of smoke. Like breathing too hard might break her. Ruth watched him. This man who had killed without flinching, who had built empires on blood and silence, tremble while holding a newborn. That's when she knew. She had to go home. Not to stay. Just to visit. To show her parents the life she'd built from the ashes of the one that was stolen. To finally tell them the truth. All of it. So when Chima was 4 months old, Ruth booked 2 tickets to Nigeria. She didn't know that someone was already waiting. She didn't know that the cousin who'd greet her at the airport had already made a deal. And she didn't know that the man Ortensio killed wasn't the only monster who remembered her face. Some homecomings aren't reunions. They're traps. If you're ready to see what happens when Ruth returns to the place that made her, and the danger that's been waiting, stay with me. Subscribe if you haven't. Drop where you're watching from. And let's get into it. Now let's begin. The heat hit Ruth the moment she stepped off the plane. Not the gentle warmth of Connecticut summers. This was different. Heavy. Alive. The kind of heat that wrapped around you and reminded your body where it came from. Chima fussed against her chest, tiny face scrunching at the change. Ruth adjusted the carrier, pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead. "Welcome home, baby girl," she whispered. "This is where Mama comes from." The Enugu airport was chaos and color. Bodies moving in every direction, voices calling out in Igbo and English and everything in between, the smell of diesel and dust and something frying nearby. Ruth had forgotten how loud home could be. She'd forgotten how much she missed it. Her phone buzzed. "Ortensio. Landed safe?" She smiled, typed back, "Just stepped out." Hot. Loud. Perfect. 3 dots appeared. Then, "Call me when you reach your parents. I'll be there in 4 days. I love you. I love you too." She slipped the phone away. Took a breath. Looked for the face she'd been waiting to see. "Ruth. Ruth, over here." The voice cut through the noise. Ruth turned. Kemi stood near the terminal exit, waving both arms like she was guiding a plane. She wore a bright yellow dress, her hair freshly braided, her smile wide enough to see from 50 feet away. Ruth's chest tightened with something she hadn't expected. Emotion. Memory. The sudden, sharp realization that she hadn't seen her cousin in over 3 years. They'd grown up together. Shared secrets. Shared clothes. Shared dreams about what they'd become when they finally escaped their small village and made something of themselves. Then Ruth left. And everything changed. Kemi reached her first, pulling her into a hug so tight Ruth almost lost her balance. "Look at you," Kemi said, pulling back, hands on Ruth's shoulders, eyes roaming her face. "America made you soft. You're glowing. And this, oh Ruth. Oh, look at her." Her eyes had found Chima. "Can I?" Kemi's hands were already reaching. Ruth hesitated. Just for a moment. Something flickered in her chest. Instinct maybe. Protectiveness. But this was Kemi. Her cousin. Her blood. She unstrapped Chima from the carrier, placed her gently in Kemi's arms. Kemi held the baby like she was holding treasure. Her eyes went soft. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "She's beautiful, Ruth. She looks just like you. She has her father's temper." Kemi laughed. "The Italian? I still can't believe it. My cousin married to an Italian. A rich one. With tattoos." She wiggled her eyebrows. "You have to tell me everything." Ruth smiled. But something in Kemi's voice snagged. A note she couldn't identify. Curiosity, yes. But underneath, something sharper. Hunger maybe. She shook it off. Jet lag. Paranoia. Too many years of looking over her shoulder. Let's go, Ruth said. Mama and Papa are waiting. The drive to her parents' house took 2 hours. 2 hours of red dirt roads and green hills and villages that looked exactly as Ruth remembered and nothing like she remembered at all. Kemi drove, a borrowed car from a friend, she said, while Ruth sat in the back with Chima, watching the landscape scroll past like a film she'd paused years ago. Kemi talked the whole way, catching Ruth up on everyone. Who married who? Who died? Who left for Lagos? Who came back broke? The new church building. The old market that finally collapsed. Ruth listened, responded when required. But her mind was elsewhere. She was rehearsing. For 3 years she'd lied to her parents. Told them she was thriving. That the scholarship had worked out. That she had a good job, a good life, a good man. All true now. But built on ashes she'd never let them see. Tonight she would tell them everything. The trafficking attempt. The year on the streets. The mansion. The maid uniform. The board. Ortensio. The blood that had been spilled so she could be free. Her mother would cry. Her father would go silent. That terrible silence that meant he was processing something too big for words. But they deserved the truth. And she was finally strong enough to give it. The house looked smaller than she remembered. Same compound walls. Same rusted gate. Same mango tree in the front yard, heavy with fruit. But everything had shrunk. Or maybe she had grown. The car stopped. Ruth's heart pounded. The front door opened. Ngozi came out first. Her mother moved faster than Ruth had ever seen her move. Down the steps, across the yard, hands already reaching before she'd even arrived. She was crying before she touched Ruth's face. My daughter. My daughter. You came home. Ruth broke. All the composure she'd built, all the walls she'd constructed, all the armor she'd worn for 3 years. It crumbled the moment her mother's hands touched her cheeks. She sobbed. Deep, ugly, heaving sobs that came from somewhere beneath her ribs. Mama. I'm home. I'm home. They held each other for a long time. Ngozi's hands in Ruth's braids. Ruth's face buried in her mother's shoulder. The smell of shea butter and palm oil and something that simply meant safe. Then Ngozi pulled back. Wiped her eyes. Looked down. And this, she breathed. This is her. This is my grandchild. Kemi had brought Chima from the car, was standing nearby with the baby in her arms. She handed her over gently. Ngozi took Chima like she was receiving a sacrament. Her lips moved. Prayers, Ruth realized. Whispered prayers over her granddaughter's head. Chisholm, Ngozi said softly. Good God. That's what your name means, little one. Good God. She looked at Ruth, eyes shining. You named her well. Ortensio chose the Igbo name, Ruth said. He researched. Wanted it to mean something. Something flickered across Ngozi's face. Surprise. Reassessment. The Italian wasn't what she'd expected. Where is your father? Ruth asked, looking toward the house. Inside. You know him. Processing. Ngozi smiled through her tears. Go. He's waiting. Even if he won't admit it. Emmanuel stood in the living room, beside the old wooden cabinet that held his books and his reading glasses and the Bible he'd had since before Ruth was born. He didn't move when she entered. Ruth stopped in the doorway. Looked at the man who had taught her to read. Who had sat with her for hours over math problems. Who had told her over and over that her mind was her ticket to anywhere she wanted to go. He looked older. Thinner. His hair had gone fully gray. His glasses sat crooked on his nose. Papa. He turned. And then he was crossing the room, faster than she thought he could move, and his arms were around her and he was holding her so tight she couldn't breathe. He said nothing. Just held. Ruth felt his tears on her neck. Her father. The man who never cried. Not at funerals. Not at weddings. Not ever as far as she could remember. Crying now. For her. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry I didn't come sooner. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. You're here. His voice cracked. That's enough. You're here. That night after dinner, after Chima had been passed between grandparents until she fell asleep in Ngozi's arms, Ruth told them everything. She sat in the living room. The same room where she'd done homework as a child. The same room where she'd received the news about the scholarship that would change her life. She told them about the man who recruited her. The flight. The house that wasn't a school. The girl in the window with the empty eyes. He told them about running. About the streets. About shelters and buses and cash jobs that paid nothing. He told them about the mansion. The maid uniform. The board covered in photos and red string. The marker in her hand. He told them about Ortensio. What he was. What he did. What he gave up because she asked him to. Ngozi wept quietly, hands pressed to her mouth, rosary beads tangled in her fingers. Emmanuel sat in silence. That terrible processing silence. When Ruth finished, the room was heavy with everything that had been said. Finally, Emmanuel spoke. The man. The Italian. He loves you. Yes, Papa. And the child. She is his. Yes. And he is no longer in that life. The violence. Ruth hesitated. He's trying. It takes time. But he's trying. Emmanuel nodded slowly. Looked at Ngozi. Looked back at Ruth. Then we will meet him. When he comes. He paused. And we will see. It wasn't acceptance. Not yet. But it wasn't rejection either. Ruth would take it. Later, Kemi helped Ruth settle Chima into a makeshift crib in Ruth's old bedroom. The same bedroom where Ruth had dreamed of America. Where she'd imagined the life she would build. That was heavy, Kemi said quietly, adjusting the mosquito net. Everything you told them. I had no idea, Ruth. None of us did. I couldn't tell anyone. I was ashamed. Ashamed. Kemi turned eyes wide. Of what? You survived. You didn't do anything wrong. Ruth looked at her cousin. Saw the warmth in her eyes. The concern. Thank you for being here, Kemi. For picking me up. For helping. Kemi smiled. Squeezed her hand. That's what family does. She hugged Ruth goodnight. Held on a beat longer than necessary. Then she left. Ruth lay in her childhood bed, Chima sleeping beside her, and stared at the ceiling. Something nagged at her. Something she couldn't name. Kemi had asked a lot of questions. About Ortensio. About his business. About where they lived. About his family, his money, his plans. Ruth had answered. Trustingly. She'd forgotten what it felt like to be suspicious of everyone. Maybe that was a mistake. She pushed the thought away. Closed her eyes. Let the sounds of home, the insects, the distant generator, her mother's prayers down the hall, carry her toward sleep. Outside, in the darkness, Kemi sat in the borrowed car, phone pressed to her ear. She's here, she said quietly. The baby too. The husband comes in 4 days. Pause. Yes. I understand. She hung up. Stared at the house where her cousin slept. Where her aunt and uncle smiled like everything was finally right. Her hands trembled. She told herself it would be okay. No one would get hurt. She just needed to clear the debt. Then everything would go back to normal. That's what she told herself. But her hands wouldn't stop shaking. 3 days passed like borrowed time. Ruth fell into the rhythm of home. Morning prayers with her mother. Afternoons on the veranda watching Chima discover the world. The flutter of butterflies, the rustle of mango leaves, the warmth of Nigerian sun on her small face. Evenings listening to her father's stories, the same ones she'd heard 100 times as a child, now precious in a way they hadn't been before. He called Ortensio every night. How is she? His voice always softened when he asked about Chima. Perfect. Mama won't put her down. I think she's already planning to keep her. And your father? Ruth smiled. Still processing. But yesterday he held her for an hour. Didn't say a word. Just held her and stared at her face like he was memorizing it. A pause on the line. Then, one more day. Then I'm there. I know. I miss you. Both of you. We miss you too. She hung up and sat in the darkness of her childhood room, listening to Chima's breathing, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Kemi came by every day. He helped with cooking. Played with Chima. Ran errands for Ngozi. She was present in a way that felt almost excessive. Always nearby, always offering, always watching. Ruth noticed. But she told herself it was love. Kemi had missed her. They were reconnecting. That was all. On the third night, Kemi offered to watch Chima while Ruth showered. Go, she said, bouncing the baby on her hip. Take your time. I've got her. Ruth hesitated. That flicker again, something instinctive, protective. But she was exhausted. 3 days of emotional intensity. 3 nights of broken sleep. Okay, she said. I'll be quick. She wasn't quick. The hot water felt too good. She stood under the spray and let it wash away the tension in her shoulders, the tightness in her neck. Let herself breathe for the first time in days. When she came out, wrapped in a towel, Kemi was standing by the window with Chima asleep in her arms. Her phone was in her hand. She tucked it away quickly when she saw Ruth. She fell asleep, Kemi whispered. Such a good baby. She is. Ruth crossed the room, took her daughter gently. Thank you. Of course. Kemi smiled. But her eyes darted, just for a second, toward the window. Toward the darkness outside. Ruth followed her gaze. Saw nothing. Just the mango tree. Just the night. Everything okay? She asked. Fine. Kemi's smile widened. Just tired. Long day. She left shortly after. Hugged Ruth at the door. Held on a beat too long. Ruth locked the door behind her. Put Chima in the crib. Lay down. Something was wrong. She could feel it now. Not paranoia. Something real. Something pressing against the edges of the piece she'd found, looking for cracks. She reached for her phone. Started to dial Ortensio. Then stopped. What would she say? That her cousin was acting strange? That she had a bad feeling? He'd worry. He'd push up his flight. He'd arrive in the middle of the night, guns and guards and chaos. She didn't want that. Not yet. Not without something real. She set the phone down. Closed her eyes. Told herself she'd feel better in the morning. She woke to glass breaking. The sound was sharp, violent, wrong. Ruth's eyes snapped open. Darkness. Chima stirring in the crib. Voices outside. Low male speaking rapid Igbo. Ruth's body moved before her mind caught up. She grabbed Chima, pressed her daughter to her chest, clamped a hand gently over her mouth before she could cry. Footsteps in the hallway. Heavy. Multiple. Her mother's voice. A scream, then muffled. Her father shouting something. A crash. A thud. Ruth's heart stopped. She looked around the room. Nowhere to hide. The wardrobe was too obvious. The bed too exposed. The closet. She moved silently, bare feet on the cold floor, Chima's small body warm against her chest. She opened the closet door, slowly, carefully, no sound, and slipped inside. The space was cramped. Old clothes pressed against her back. The smell of mothballs and dust filled her nose. Chima squirmed, began to whimper. Shoo, Ruth breathed against her daughter's ear. Shoo, baby. Please. Please be quiet. She pressed her eye to the slats in the closet door. The bedroom door burst open. Two men entered. Flashlights sweeping the room. They wore dark clothes, faces covered with fabric. One carried a machete. The other had a gun. Ruth stopped breathing. They checked the bed. Under it. Behind the curtains. One of them kicked the crib, empty now, and cursed. She's not here, he said in Igbo. The daughter. The baby. Keep looking. She didn't leave. The car is still outside. They moved through the room. Close it. Close it. Ruth pressed her back against the closet wall. Her hand covered Chima's mouth. Her daughter's eyes were wide, confused, but silent. Somehow miraculously silent. One of the men stopped in front of the closet. Ruth's heart pounded so loud she was certain he could hear it. His hand reached for the door. Then, a shout from outside. Another man calling. We got them. The old ones. Let's go. The man at the closet paused. His hand dropped. He turned, left the room, heavy footsteps fading down the hallway. Ruth didn't move. Didn't breathe. She heard them leave. Heard car doors slam. Heard engines roar to life and tires tear through gravel. Then silence. Terrible, endless silence. Ruth waited 10 minutes. Maybe 20. Time had stopped meaning anything. When she finally opened the closet door, her legs wouldn't hold her. She collapsed to the floor. Chima clutched to her chest and let the sobs come. Then she forced herself to stand. The house was destroyed. Furniture overturned. Windows shattered. Blood on the living room floor. Not much, but enough. Her mother's rosary beads scattered across the tiles. Her parents were gone. A note sat on the kitchen table. Written in English. Neat, careful handwriting. Tell the Italian we're waiting. He has 48 hours. We'll send the address. If he comes alone, they live. If he doesn't, they don't. Don't involve police. No. Ruth read it 3 times. Each time the words made less sense. Each time the hole in her chest grew wider. She reached for her phone. Dialed Ortensio. He answered on the first ring. Ruth? What's wrong? She opened her mouth. Tried to speak. Nothing came out. Ruth. Talk to me. They took them. Her voice cracked. Shattered. Mom and Papa. They came to the house. They took them. Silence. Then, are you hurt? Is Chima? We're okay. We hid. They didn't find us. She heard him moving. Doors opening. Keys dangling. I'm coming. I'm on the next flight. Don't move. Don't talk to anyone. Don't. Ortensio. She took a breath. They want you. The note says you have to come alone. 48 hours. More silence. Longer this time. It's a trap, he said finally. They want me dead. I know. I'm still coming. I know. She heard him exhale. That controlled breath she knew meant he was calculating. Planning. Becoming the version of himself she'd asked him to leave behind. Ruth. Listen to me. Whatever happens, whatever I have to do, I'm bringing them back. Your parents. I'm bringing them home. I know. Tears streamed down her face. I know you will. I love you. I love you too. The line went dead. Ruth sat in the wreckage of her childhood home, her daughter sleeping against her chest, and stared at the note on the table. Somewhere in the darkness, her parents were being held by men who wanted her husband dead. Somewhere in the sky, her husband was racing toward a trap he knew he couldn't avoid. And somewhere closer than Ruth wanted to believe, her cousin Kemi was watching. Waiting to see what happened next. The knock came at dawn. Ruth hadn't slept. She'd sat in the corner of the living room back against the wall, Chima in her arms, eyes on every door and window. Waiting for them to come back. Waiting for anything. The knock was soft. Hesitant. Ruth didn't move. Ruth. A voice. Familiar. Ruth, it's me. Open the door. Kemi. Ruth stood slowly. Walked to the door. Opened it. Kemi stood on the porch, dressed in the same clothes from yesterday, eyes red like she'd been crying. Her hands were shaking. I heard, she said. I heard what happened. Are you okay? Is the baby? How did you hear? Kemi blinked. What? How did you hear, Kemi? Ruth's voice was flat. Dead. It happened 4 hours ago. In the middle of the night. No one else knows. The neighbors didn't see anything. I haven't called anyone except my husband. Kemi's face went pale. So how, Ruth continued, stepping closer, did you hear? Kemi's mouth opened. Closed. Her eyes filled with tears. Ruth, I didn't. Don't lie to me. The words came out sharp enough to cut. Kemi flinched. Please, she whispered. Please, let me explain. Explain what? That you sold us? That you told them when I was coming? That you've been watching me, asking questions, waiting for the right moment. I didn't know they would. Didn't know what? Ruth's voice broke. Chima, startled awake, began to cry. Ruth forced herself to breathe. Bounced her daughter gently. Lowered her voice. Didn't know what, Kemi? That they would take my parents? That they would threaten to kill them? What exactly did you think would happen when you made a deal with the men who traffic girls like me? Kemi was crying now. Ugly tears streaming down her face. I owed them money, she said. Chukwemeka. My husband, he borrowed from them before he left. They said I had to pay or they would. She couldn't finish. So you gave them me instead. Kemi looked away. That was answer enough. Ruth stared at her cousin. This girl she'd grown up with. This woman she'd trusted. You should leave, Ruth said quietly. Ruth, please. Leave. No. Before I do something I can't take back. Kemi stood frozen for a moment. Then she turned. Walked down the steps. Got in her borrowed car. She paused before closing the door. Back. I'm sorry, she said. I know it doesn't matter. But I'm sorry. Ruth said nothing. Just watched her drive away. Then she closed the door. Locked it. Slid down to the floor. Chima was still crying. Ruth held her tighter. I know, baby, she whispered. I know. But we're going to get through this. We're going to find them. She looked at the note still sitting on the kitchen table. 48 hours. Ortensio was coming. And when he arrived, they were going to burn this network to the ground. Ortensio landed in Enugu 12 hours later. Ruth was waiting at the airport, Chima strapped to her chest, dark circles carved under her eyes. She hadn't slept. Hadn't eaten. Had spent the hours pacing the ruined house, checking windows, flinching at every sound. When she saw him walking through the terminal, something in her chest cracked open. He looked wrong. Not wrong like damaged, wrong like dangerous. His jaw was set in a way she'd only seen once before. His eyes scanned the crowd like he was cataloging threats. His body moved with that controlled tension she remembered from the early days, when he was still the man who locked doors and gave orders she couldn't refuse. He wasn't her husband right now. He was the boss. But when he reached her, when his eyes found her face, then Chima's, something softened. Just for a moment. Just enough. He pulled her into his arms. Held her so tight she could feel his heartbeat against her cheek. His hand cradled the back of Chima's head, gentle despite everything. "I'm here," he murmured into her hair. "I'm here." Ruth let herself collapse. Just for a second. Just long enough to remember that she wasn't alone anymore. Then she pulled back. Wiped her eyes. Straightened. "We need to move," she said. "I have information." His eyes sharpened. "What kind?" "Kemi came to the house this morning. My cousin. The one who sold you out." Ruth flinched at the flatness in his voice. "Yes." "Where is she now?" "I don't know. I told her to leave. But before she left she was crying. Apologizing. She let things slip, things she didn't mean to say." Ortensio's jaw tightened. "What things?" "A name." She said it once, then caught herself. Tried to take it back. "But I heard it." "Emeka. Do you know him?" Ortensio was silent for a moment. Then, "Victor Ashford had a man in Nigeria. Handled recruitment. Processing. Made sure the girls had paperwork, got them on planes. I never had a name. Just rumors." "You think this is him?" "I think Victor's network didn't die when he did. It fractured. Pieces went underground. Someone picked them up." He looked at her. His eyes were dark, calculating, but beneath the strategy she saw something else. Fear. For her. For Chima. For the parents he'd never met but had promised to save. "We need to find this Emeka," he said. "And we need to find Kemi. She knows more than she's saying." Ruth nodded. "I know where to start." The market was exactly as Ruth remembered. Chaos and color and noise. Traders shouting prices, customers haggling, motorcycles weaving through the narrow paths between stalls. The smell of dried fish and palm oil and sweat hung thick in the humid air. Ruth moved through it like water. Her body remembered the rhythms, the patterns, the unspoken rules of navigation. Ortensio followed close behind, a head taller than everyone around him, drawing stares he pretended not to notice. He was a foreigner here. Oblivious. Exposed. But he stayed close to Ruth, let her lead, said nothing. He was the one with power now. They stopped at a stall near the center of the market. An old woman sat behind a table of fabrics, her face lined with decades of sun and survival. She looked up as Ruth approached. "Mama Nkechi," Ruth said in Igbo. "It's been a long time." The woman squinted. Then her eyes widened. "Ruth? Obi Emmanuel's daughter." "Yes, Mama." The woman struggled to her feet, pulled Ruth into a hug that smelled like palm wine and mothballs. "Look at you. Look at you. America agreed with you." She pulled back, noticed the baby strapped to Ruth's chest. "And this, oh, God is good. God is good." Her eyes drifted past Ruth, landed on Ortensio. Her expression shifted, not fear exactly. More like recognition. She knew what he was. Women like her always did. "Your husband?" she asked carefully. "Yes." Mama Nkechi nodded slowly. "He looks like trouble." "He is. The good kind." The old woman laughed, a rusty wheezing sound. Then her face grew serious. "You didn't come here for fabric, did you?" "No, Mama. I heard what happened. Your parents." She shook her head. "Bad men. Everyone knows but no one talks. That's how it is." Ruth leaned closer. "I need to find someone. A man named Emeka." Mama Nkechi's face went still. "Emeka who?" "I don't have a surname. Just Emeka. He works with the people who take girls. The silence that followed was heavy. Mama and Nkechi looked at Ruth, then at Ortensio, then back at Ruth. You sure you want to find him? He has my parents. The old woman closed her eyes. When she opened them again, something had hardened. There's a compound. Outside the city. Near the old quarry, you know the one? Where we used to play as children. Ruth nodded. She remembered. Hot days, dusty rocks, the echo of their voices off the stone walls. Emeka runs his business from there. Everyone knows. No one goes near. The police. She spat on the ground. The police are useless. Bought and paid for. Can you draw me a map? Mama and Nkechi reached under her table. Pulled out a scrap of paper and a pen. Her hands were steady as she sketched. Roads, landmarks, the outline of the quarry. Be careful, daughter, she said, handing Ruth the paper. These men, they don't play. They take and they don't give back. I know. Your husband. He's going to kill them. Ruth glanced at Ortensio. He said nothing. Just watched. If he has to. Mama and Nkechi nodded. Good. They didn't go to the compound immediately. Ortensio wanted surveillance. Information. He wanted to know how many men, what kind of weapons, where the exits were. He wanted to plan. Ruth wanted to burn it down. We don't have time, she said, pacing the ruined living room of her parents' house. Chima was sleeping in a makeshift crib nearby, blankets piled in the corner, the safest spot Ruth could find. They said 48 hours. That was 12 hours ago. We have 36 hours left. Maybe less. Which is exactly why we can't rush in. My parents are in there. I know. They could be hurting them right now. I know. Then why? Because if we go in blind, we die. Ortensio's voice was calm. Too calm. The voice he used when he was holding himself back. And if we die, your parents die anyway. And Chima grows up an orphan. Ruth stopped pacing. Stared at him. He was right. She knew he was right. But the knowledge didn't ease the fire in her chest. So what do? We find Kemi. Why? Because she's been inside. She knows the layout. She knows how many men, where they keep prisoners, how they operate. She's our way in. Ruth shook her head. She won't help us. He's terrified. She ran. Then we make her less terrified of them than she is of us. The coldness in his voice made Ruth flinch. What does that mean? Ortensio crossed the room. Stopped in front of her. His hands found her shoulders. Large, warm, steady. It means I'm going to talk to her. Just talk. And if talking doesn't work? He didn't answer. His eyes said enough. Ruth pulled away. Walked to the window. Stared at the mango tree, its branches heavy with fruit that no one would pick now. I'll find her, she said quietly. Ruth. She's my cousin. My family. If anyone's going to convince her, it should be me. Ortensio was silent for a long moment. Then, and if you can't convince her? Ruth turned. Met his eyes. Then you do what you have to do. Finding Kemi took 3 hours. Ruth asked at the market. At the church. At the houses of people who remembered her from childhood. Everyone knew Kemi. Everyone had an opinion about her. Poor thing, married to a useless man, always struggling, always ashamed. Finally, an old schoolmate pointed her toward a small room in a boarding house on the edge of town. Ruth went alone. Ortensio stayed with Chima, reluctantly, but he understood. This had to be between them. The boarding house was run down. Cracked walls, rusted zinc roof, the smell of kerosene and cooking smoke. Ruth climbed the stairs to the second floor, found the door her schoolmate had described. She knocked. No answer. Kemi. Her voice was steady. I know you're in there. Open the door. Silence. I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to talk. More silence. Then the sound of footsteps. A lock turning. The door cracked open. Kemi's face appeared in the gap. She looked worse than before. Eyes swollen. Skin ashen. She'd aged 10 years in 12 hours. Ruth. Her voice was a whisper. You shouldn't be here. I need your help. I can't. My parents are going to die. Kemi flinched. Her eyes dropped. I know you're scared, Ruth continued. I know they threatened you. But right now my mother and father are in a compound with men who traffic girls like me. Like you. Like our sisters and daughters and cousins. She stepped closer. Kemi retreated, but the door stayed open. You made a mistake, Kemi. A terrible mistake. But you can fix it. You can help me get them back. If I help you, they'll kill me. If you don't help me, I'll never forgive you. And you'll have to live with that for the rest of your life. Kemi's face crumpled. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I didn't want any of this, she whispered. I just wanted the debt gone. I just wanted to be free. I know. Ruth's voice softened. I know what it feels like to be trapped. To make choices you're not proud of just to survive. I've been there. She reached out. Took Kemi's hand. But this is the moment where you decide who you're going to be. Are you going to let them win? Or are you going to help me fight? Kemi looked at their joined hands. At Ruth's face. At the determination burning in her cousin's eyes. For a long moment, nothing. Then Kemi opened the door wider. Come inside, she said. I'll tell you everything I know. Kemi talked for an hour. She told Ruth about the compound. The layout. The guards. Where they kept prisoners. When they rotated shifts. Where Emeka slept. She drew maps on scraps of paper. Named names. Described faces. And she told Ruth one more thing. They know about Chima. Ruth's blood went cold. What? When I gave them information about you. I told them about your daughter. They want her. Why? Kemi looked away. Shame burning in her features. Because she's worth money. A baby with Nigerian and Italian blood. Wealthy father. The right buyers would pay a fortune. Ruth couldn't breathe. Her hands were shaking. Where is she now? Kemi asked. The baby. With Ortensio. At my parents' house. Good. Keep her close. Don't let her out of your sight. Ruth nodded. But her mind was racing. They wanted Chima. This wasn't just about Ortensio. Wasn't just about revenge for Victor Ashford. They wanted her daughter. Over her dead body. Kemi. Her voice was ice. You're going to help us get into that compound. And when we do, you're going to show us exactly where they're keeping my parents. And then... Ruth stood. Looked down at her cousin. And then you're going to stay out of the way while my husband does what he does best. Night fell over Enugu like a held breath. Ruth sat in the darkness of her parents' living room, Chima asleep in her arms, watching Ortensio prepare. He moved with precision, checking weapons, reviewing maps, memorizing routes. His face was stone. His hands were steady. But his eyes, when they found hers across the room, were anything but calm. You should stay here, he said quietly. With Chima. Let me handle the compound. No. Ruth. I said no. She stood. Crossed the room. Stopped in front of him. These are my parents. My country. My language. You don't even speak Igbo. You don't know the roads. You don't know the people. She held his gaze. You need me. I need you alive. Then we stay together. Ortensio's jaw tightened. A muscle flickered near his temple. That tell she'd learned to read, the one that meant he was fighting something inside himself. If something happens to you, nothing's going to happen to me. Because you're going to protect me. And I'm going to protect you. She reached up, touched his face. That's how this works. That's how we work. He closed his eyes. Leaned into her palm. For a moment he wasn't the boss. He was just a man terrified of losing the woman he loved. Okay, he whispered. Together. Kemi arrived at midnight. She looked different, harder somehow. Like the hours since their conversation had stripped away something soft. She wore dark clothes, practical shoes. Her hair was pulled back tight. I'm ready, she said. Ruth studied her cousin's face. Searching for the lie. Searching for the trap. You understand what's going to happen tonight? Yes. People are going to die. Kemi's jaw tightened. They're not people. Not anymore. Not after what they've done. Ruth nodded slowly. He wanted to believe her. She needed to believe her. But she didn't turn her back on Kemi. Not completely. Not yet. Where's Chima going? Kemi asked. Somewhere safe. Someone I trust. Ruth had called Mama Nkechi earlier. The old woman hadn't hesitated. Bring the child to me. I'll protect her with my life. She'd meant it. Ruth had heard it in her voice. Ortensio emerged from the back room, dressed in black, his tattoos hidden beneath long sleeves. He looked at Kemi. Said nothing. His eyes did the talking, cold, assessing, making calculations Ruth couldn't read. You know the compound, he said. Not a question. Yes. How many guards? 8 on rotation. 4 at night. 2 at the main gate. 2 inside. Weapons. Machetes. A few guns. Nothing heavy. And Emeka? Kemi's face flickered. Something like fear quickly suppressed. He stays in the main building. Top floor. He has 2 men with him always. Does he know we're coming? He knows the deadline is tomorrow. He thinks he has time. Ortensio nodded. Turned to Ruth. We move in 1 hour. Drop Chima at Mom and Ketchy's first. Then we drive to the quarry. And then... His eyes darkened. And then we get your parents back. The drive to Mom and Ketchy's house took 15 minutes. Ruth held Chima the entire way, her daughter's warm weight a comfort against the cold fear in her chest. When they arrived, the old woman was waiting at her door, wrapped in a faded wrapper, her face set with determination. Give her to me, Mom and Ketchy said, arms outstretched. Ruth hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to hold tighter, to never let go. Ruth. Mom and Ketchy's voice softened. I raised 6 children. Buried 2. Protected the rest through a civil war. Your daughter will be safe with me. Ruth looked at Chima's sleeping face. So peaceful. So unaware of the danger surrounding her. She kissed her daughter's forehead. Breathed in her scent, milk and warmth and everything worth fighting for. Then she placed her in Mom and Ketchy's arms. If we don't come back by dawn, you'll come back. But if we don't, you'll come back. Mom and Ketchy's eyes were fierce. Because that child needs her mother. And God is not so cruel as to take you from her now. Ruth couldn't speak. She nodded. Turned away before the tears could fall. Ortensio stood by the car watching. When she reached him, he pulled her close. Held her for a moment. She'll be okay, he murmured. I know. We'll be back for her. I know. But knowing and believing were different things. The quarry road was dark. No streetlights. No moon. Just the headlights cutting through blackness and the crunch of gravel beneath tires. Kemi sat in the back seat directing them. Left here, right there, slow down, there's a turn coming. Ruth sat in the passenger seat, watching the darkness swallow them whole. 20 minutes outside the city, Kemi said, stop here. Ortensio killed the engine. The silence was immediate, oppressive. The compound is half a mile ahead, Kemi whispered. There's a footpath through the bush. It leads to the back wall. The guards don't watch it as closely. You're sure? I've used it before. When I came to give them information. Ruth heard the shame in her cousin's voice. Chose not to acknowledge it. There would be time for that later. There was a later. They moved through the darkness on foot. Ruth hadn't walked through bush like this in years. Her body remembered how to step quietly, how to avoid branches, how to read the ground by starlight. Ortensio followed close behind her, his movements surprisingly silent for a man his size. Kemi led the way. 10 minutes. 15. The sound of generators growing louder. Then lights. The compound emerging from the darkness like a wound in the landscape. It was larger than Ruth expected. A collection of buildings surrounded by a crumbling concrete wall. The main structure was 3 stories, windows barred, a rusted antenna on the roof. Smaller buildings flanked it, storage perhaps, or holding cells. Or prisons. They crouched behind a cluster of bushes 50 meters from the back wall. That building, Kemi whispered, pointing to the main structure. Prisoners are kept on the ground floor. There's a room in the back, reinforced door, no windows. That's where they'll be. And Emeka? Top floor. He doesn't come down much. Lets his men handle things. Ortensio studied the compound. His eyes moved systematically, guards, lights, cameras, entry points. Ruth watched him calculate, strategize, become the man he'd promised to stop being. 2 guards at the back gate, he said quietly. 1 near the generator. 1 walking patrol. How do we get past them? Ruth asked. Ortensio reached into his jacket. Pulled out something that glinted in the faint light. We don't get past them. We go through them. Ruth had seen Ortensio's violence before. Once. The night they'd first kissed. When Victor Ashford's men had tried to ambush them on the street. She'd watched him move like water, like shadow, like death itself. She'd told herself it was necessary. Told herself it was protection. But watching and participating were different things. They moved toward the compound in silence. Ortensio took the first guard from behind. One hand over the mouth, one quick motion with something Ruth didn't see. The man dropped without a sound. The second guard turned at exactly the wrong moment. Saw them. Opened his mouth to shout. Ortensio crossed the distance before the sound could form. This time Ruth saw the blade. Saw it disappear. Saw the guard crumple. She didn't look away. She forced herself to watch. This was the cost. This was what it took to get her parents back. She would carry it. She would remember it. She would not pretend it wasn't happening. They breached the back wall through a gap Chima showed them, loose concrete that could be pushed aside. The compound inside was quieter than expected. Most of the men were in the front buildings, drinking, laughing, unaware. Ruth led them to the main structure. Her heart pounded in her ears. The reinforced door was exactly where Chima said it would be. One guard sat outside, half asleep, an empty bottle beside him. Ortensio handled him. Quietly. The door was locked. Heavy padlock. Rusted but solid. Ortensio pulled something from his pocket. A small tool Ruth didn't recognize. 30 seconds of work. The lock clicked open. Ruth pushed the door. The smell hit her first. Sweat and fear and something worse. Blood, old and dried. Then her eyes adjusted. And she saw them. Emmanuel sat against the far wall, his arms bound behind his back, his face swollen and bruised. One eye was closed shut. His glasses were gone. Ngozi lay beside him, curled on the concrete floor, her wrapper torn, her hair matted with blood. She wasn't moving. Ruth's legs gave out. She fell to her knees, a sound escaping her throat that wasn't quite human. Animal, primal, broken. Mama. Papa. Emmanuel's one good eye opened. Focused. Widened. Ruth. His voice was a croak. Ruth, you shouldn't be here. They're waiting. A light flooded the room. Ruth spun. Too late. 3 men stood in the doorway. Armed. Smiling. And behind them, Emeka. He was smaller than Ruth expected. Average height. Average build. The kind of face you'd forget in a crowd. But his eyes were dead. Empty. Looking at her like she was inventory. Ruth Obi, he said pleasantly. The one who ran. We've been waiting for you. Tensio moved. Fast. But not fast enough. The crack of a gunshot split the air. Ortensio staggered, grabbing his shoulder. Blood seeped through his fingers. No sudden movements. Emeka wagged his finger like he was scolding a child. We're going to do this properly. More men poured into the room. 5, 6. Too many. Ruth found herself pushed to her knees beside her parents. Ortensio was forced down beside her, still bleeding, his face twisted with fury. Emeka walked closer. Stopped in front of Ruth. You caused us a lot of trouble, he said conversationally. Years ago when you ran. And then again when your husband destroyed our operation in America. Victor Ashford was a friend. A business partner. And now he's dead. Good, Ruth spat. Emeka smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. I'm going to enjoy this. Breaking you. Breaking him. Making him watch while I... Where's my daughter? The question came from Ruth's mouth before she could stop it. Fear and fury blending into something reckless. Emeka's smile widened. The baby? Don't worry. We'll find her. Your cousin was very helpful with that information. The old woman's house near the market, yes? We have men on the way now. Ruth's blood turned to ice. No. She looked at Chima, still standing near the doorway, face pale, trembling. You told them, Ruth breathed. You told them where Chima was. Chimi's eyes filled with tears. I didn't, they made me, I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Ruth lunged. Hands still free, they hadn't bound her yet. She crashed into Chima, both of them hitting the ground, Ruth's hands around her cousin's throat. Men grabbed her. Pulled her back. She fought, kicking, screaming, biting. A fist connected with her face. The world exploded into white light and pain. When her vision cleared, she was on the ground. Blood in her mouth. Ortensio was shouting her name. Emeka stood over her, no longer smiling. That wasn't smart, he said coldly. Now I'm going to have to hurt you. And then I'm going to hurt your daughter. And then I'm going to make you watch while I sell them both to the highest bidder. He nodded to his men. Tie them up. All of them. We'll start in the morning. As rough hands dragged her across the concrete, Ruth's eyes found Ortensio's. He was bleeding. Bound. Powerless. But his eyes were making a promise. This wasn't over. Not by a long way. The room they were thrown into was small. Windowless. The air thick with heat and the smell of rust and old fear. Ruth's hands were bound behind her back with rough rope that bit into her wrists. Her face throbbed where she'd been hit. Blood had dried on her lip, cracking every time she breathed. But she was alive. And she wasn't alone. Ortensio sat beside her, his back against the wall, his shoulder still bleeding through a makeshift bandage one of Emika's men had wrapped around it. Not out of mercy but to keep him alive long enough for whatever came next. Her parents were on the other side of the room. Emmanuel had managed to sit up, his one good eye fixed on Ruth with a mixture of terror and heartbreak. Ngozi was awake now, barely, her head resting on her husband's shoulder, her lips moving in silent prayer. No one spoke for a long time. Then Emmanuel's voice, hoarse, cracked but steady. You shouldn't have come. Ruth looked at her father. At the bruises on his face. At the blood staining his shirt. I had to. They'll kill you. They'll kill all of us now. No. Ruth's voice was harder than she intended. They won't. Emmanuel's eye moved to Ortensio. The man his daughter had married. The man who was bleeding beside her, bound and helpless. Your husband. He's one of them. The violent ones. It wasn't a question. Ortensio met the old man's gaze. Said nothing. I know what you are, Emmanuel continued quietly. I knew the moment I saw you. Men like you, I've seen them before. During the war. During the years after. Men who solve problems with blood. Papa, Ruth started. Let me finish. Silence. Emmanuel took a breath. Winced at the pain it caused. I spent my whole life teaching children that education was the answer. That knowledge could overcome anything. That violence was the refuge of the weak-minded. He paused. But those men, Emika and his people, they took us from our home. They beat us. They threatened to do things to your mother that I cannot speak aloud. His voice cracked. He steadied himself. And now you're here. Both of you. Because you came for us. Because you walked into this place knowing what it was. Knowing what it would cost. He looked at Ortensio again. This time something different in his eye. Not judgment. Something closer to recognition. I don't understand your world. I don't approve of it. But you came for my daughter. You came for us. And whatever happens next, I see that. I see you. Ortensio held the old man's gaze for a long moment. I'm going to get you out of here, he said quietly. All of you. I give you my word. Your word. Emmanuel almost smiled. The word of a killer. The word of a man who loves your daughter more than his own life. Emmanuel said nothing. But something shifted in his expression. A wall coming down. Not all the way but enough. Ngozi stirred. Her eyes opened, found Ruth's face. Hi baby, she whispered. You came home. Ruth's eyes burned. I'm here, Mama. I'm here. The child. Chisholm. Where? She's safe. Ruth prayed it was true. She's with Mom and Kechi. She's safe. Ngozi closed her eyes. Her lips moved again. More prayers. Ruth hoped God was listening. Hours passed. Or maybe minutes. Time had lost all meaning in the darkness. Ruth worked at her bonds. The rope was tight but she was patient. Methodical. She twisted her wrists slowly, ignoring the pain, feeling for any give. Stop. Ortensio's voice was low. You'll hurt yourself. I don't care. Ruth. My daughter is out there. Emika's men are going for her right now. I'm not going to sit here and... Listen to me. Something in his voice made her stop. Mama and Kechi's house, he said quietly. I didn't tell you everything. Ruth turned her head. Looked at him. What do you mean? Before we left Connecticut, I made arrangements. People I trust. They landed in Lagos yesterday. They're here. In Enugu. Ruth's heart stuttered. What? I wasn't going to walk into this blind. I couldn't bring an army, too obvious. But I brought 3 men. The best I have. They've been watching the compound since before we arrived. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed you focused. And because I wasn't sure how this would go. He shifted, wincing at the pain in his shoulder. But they're out there. And when we didn't check in at the scheduled time, they knew something was wrong. Ruth stared at him, trying to process. They know where Mom and Ketchy's house is? Yes. They'll protect Chima? With their lives. Ruth closed her eyes. Let the relief wash over her. Incomplete, fragile, but real. You should have told me. I know. I'm sorry. She opened her eyes. Found his in the darkness. Don't apologize. Just get us out of here. Ortensio smiled. Just barely. Just enough. Working on it. The door opened an hour later. Not Emeka. One of his men, the one who'd hit Ruth earlier. Big, thick-necked, a machete hanging from his belt. He carried a lantern that filled the room with flickering orange light. The woman, he said, pointing at Ruth. Boss wants to see her. Ortensio surged forward. The ropes held him but barely. Touch her and I'll kill you. The man laughed. You're not killing anyone, Oyabo. Look at you bleeding like a pig. By morning you'll be dead anyway. He crossed the room, grabbed Ruth by the arm, hauled her to her feet. Ruth didn't fight. Didn't struggle. She let herself be dragged, her eyes fixed on Ortensio's face. Trust me, his eyes said. I do, hers answered. The door slammed shut behind her. They took her upstairs. The main building was larger inside than it looked. Corridors branching off in multiple directions, rooms with closed doors, the smell of cigarettes and cheap alcohol drifting from somewhere nearby. The man dragged her up 2 flights of stairs, down a hallway, stopped in front of a door. Knocked twice. Enter. The room beyond was almost comfortable. A desk. A chair. A small bed in the corner. Windows that overlooked the compound, barred, but letting in the faint light of approaching dawn. Emeka sat behind the desk, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked up as Ruth was shoved inside. Smiled that empty smile. Ruth Obi. Please sit. The guard pushed her into a chair opposite the desk. Her hands were still bound behind her back. Emeka waved the guard away. Leave us. Boss. I said leave. The guard hesitated. Then retreated, closing the door behind him. Emeka studied Ruth for a long moment. Swirled the whiskey in his glass. You know, he said conversationally, I remember you. From years ago. When you first came through our system. Ruth said nothing. You were different from the others. Most girls, they cry. They beg. They break before they even reach America. He took a sip. But you ran. First night. No plan, no money, no contacts. Just instinct. He leaned forward. I've always wondered what would have happened if we'd caught you. What you would have become. Some girls, they fight at first, then they learn. They adapt. They become useful. His eyes traced her face. You would have been valuable. Your mind. Your determination. Is there a point to this? Ruth's voice was flat. Or do you just like hearing yourself talk? Emeka laughed. Oh, I like you. I really do. It's a shame I have to hurt you. Then don't. Not an option, I'm afraid. Your husband killed Victor. Destroyed our American operation. Took money out of my pocket. A lot of money. Someone has to pay for that. And if I give you something better? Emeka's eyebrows rose. Better than revenge? Better than killing us and gaining nothing. He leaned back. Understood now. I'm listening. Ruth's mind raced. She had nothing to offer. Nothing real. But she needed time. Needed to keep him talking. Needed to give Ortensio's men a chance to move. My husband's network, she said slowly. He stepped back from leadership, but he still has connections. Information. Access to routes, accounts, contacts you don't have. And you're offering this to me? In exchange for what? Your parents' lives. In exchange for all our lives. And a partnership. Emeka stared at her. Then laughed. Long, genuine, almost delighted. A partnership. With the woman whose husband killed my mentor. That's audacious. It's practical. You lost your American connection. You need a new one. Ortensio has what you need. And he would agree to this. Work with me. He would do anything to protect his family. Emeka considered this. For a long moment Ruth thought he might actually believe her. Might actually be tempted. Then his smile faded. You're stalling. Ruth's blood went cold. You think I don't see it? The way you're talking, buying time. hoping for rescue. He stood, walked around the desk, stopped in front of her. There's no rescue coming, Ruth. Your husband is bleeding out in a basement. Your daughter is already on her way here. Yes, we got her. My men picked her up an hour ago. No. Ruth's world collapsed. You're lying. Am I? Emeka pulled out a phone. Showed her a photo. Chima. In the arms of a stranger. Her face scrunched in distress. The background unmistakably a vehicle interior. Ruth couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't. So let's dispense with the games, Emeka said, tucking the phone away. Here's what's going to happen. At dawn, I'm going to bring your husband upstairs. I'm going to make him watch while I hurt you. Then I'm going to bring your daughter in. And I'm going to sell her to someone who pays very well for babies with mixed heritage. He leaned close. His breath was whiskey and rot. And there's nothing you can do to stop it. Ruth looked at him. At his empty eyes. His satisfied smile. And something inside her shifted. Not breaking. Not surrendering. Something else. You're wrong, she said quietly. About what? About there being nothing I can do. She stood. Fast. The chair fell backward. Emeka stepped back surprised, then laughed. What are you going to do? Your hands are tied. You're alone. You. Ruth swung her head forward. Her forehead connected with his nose. Bone crunched. Blood sprayed. Emeka staggered back, clutching his face, screaming. Ruth didn't stop. He kicked hard, catching him in the knee. He dropped. She kicked again, aiming for his head. Connected. He went down. But he wasn't unconscious. And her hands were still bound. He was reaching for something at his waist. A gun, she realized, and she had seconds. She dropped to her knees. Rolled to the side. Her fingers found the leg of the fallen chair. Worked frantically at the rope against the wooden edge. Emeka raised the gun. His hand was shaking. Blood poured from his nose. You. The rope gave. Ruth's hands were free. She moved on instinct. Launched herself at him before he could fire. Her hand closed around his wrist, forced the gun upward. The shot went wild, deafening in the small room, punching a hole in the ceiling. They struggled. He was stronger but disoriented. Bleeding. She was desperate. Her knee found his groin. He doubled over. She wrenched the gun from his grip. And then she was standing over him, the weapon in her hands, her chest heaving. Emeka looked up at her. Blood covering his face. Fear finally cracking through the emptiness. You won't, he said. You're not a killer. Ruth's hands were steady. No, she said quietly. But I'm a mother. She didn't shoot him. Instead, she brought the gun down hard against his temple. He dropped. Didn't move. Ruth stood in the silence, breathing hard, the weight of the gun unfamiliar in her hands. Then footsteps. Running. Coming up the stairs. She moved to the door. Pressed her back against the wall beside it. The door burst open. A guard rushed in, machete raised. Ruth fired. The sound was enormous. The recoil nearly knocked her backward. The guard crumpled. More footsteps. More shouting. Ruth looked around the room. Saw the window. Barred but old. The metal rusted, the concrete around it crumbling. She grabbed Emeka's chair. Swung it against the bars. Once. Twice. The concrete cracked. A third swing. The bars came loose. Gunfire erupted somewhere below. Not aimed at her, aimed at something else. Someone else. Ortensio's men. Had to be. Ruth looked at the window. At the drop below, 2 stories, maybe survivable, maybe not. She looked at the unconscious Emeka. At the chaos unfolding around her. She made her choice. He climbed through the window. Ruth hit the ground hard. Pain exploded through her ankles, her knees, her hip. She rolled, instinct taking over, and came up in a crouch, the gun still clutched in her hand. The compound was chaos. Gunfire crackled from multiple directions. Men were running, some toward the main building, some away from it. Shouts in Igbo and Pidgin English overlapped, creating a wall of noise. And through it all Ruth saw them. 3 men moving like shadows. Precise. Coordinated. Cutting through Emeka's guards with brutal efficiency. They wore dark clothes, no insignia, nothing that would identify them. But the way they moved, the discipline, the control, told Ruth everything she needed to know. Ortensio's men. Ruth pushed herself to her feet. Her left ankle screamed in protest. Twisted, maybe sprained, but not broken. She could still move. He had to find Ortensio. Had to find her parents. Had to find Chima. The photo Emika had shown her flashed through her mind. Her daughter's scrunched face. The stranger's arms. The vehicle interior. Was it real? Or was he lying to break her? He didn't know. And not knowing was worse than anything. Ruth moved along the edge of the compound, staying low, using shadows and crumbling walls for cover. The main building was 30 meters away. The back entrance, where they'd first been captured, was her best bet. A guard stumbled into her path. He was young, barely more than a boy. Eyes wide with panic, machete trembling in his grip. He saw her. Raised the blade. Ruth raised the gun. For a moment neither moved. Then the boy dropped the machete. Turned. Ran into the darkness. Ruth exhaled. Kept moving. The back entrance was unguarded. Emika's men were too busy dying to watch the doors. Ruth slipped inside, the gun raised, her eyes adjusting to the dim interior. The hallway was empty. The sounds of fighting seemed distant here, muffled by concrete and chaos. He found the stairs. Descended. The room where they'd been held was at the end of the corridor. The door was open now, kicked in, the lock shattered. Ruth's heart stopped. She ran. The room was empty. The ropes that had bound Ortensio lay cut on the floor. Her parents' bindings were there too, sliced clean. Blood smeared the concrete, but not enough to mean death. Just enough to mean struggle. They were gone. But where? A sound behind her. Ruth spun, gun raised. A figure emerged from the shadows. Familiar. Unwelcome. Chemi. Her cousin stood in the doorway, hands raised, face tear-streaked, body trembling. Ruth. Please. Don't shoot. Ruth's finger tightened on the trigger. Give me one reason. I can help you. I know where they took your daughter. The words cut through Ruth's rage like ice water. What? Chima. I know where she is. Chemi's voice cracked. They didn't take her to the compound. They took her somewhere else. A backup location. In case things went wrong here. Why should I believe you? Because I'm the one who told them about Mom and Kechi's house. Tears spilled down Chemi's cheeks. And because I'm the one who can undo it. Ruth stared at her cousin. At this woman who had sold her family. Who had endangered her daughter. Who had caused all of this. Every instinct screamed to pull the trigger. To end this. To make her pay. But Ruth wasn't a killer. Not like that. Not in cold blood. And Chemi was the only one who knew where Chima was. Talk, Ruth said. Fast. Chemi talked. The words spilled out in a rush. Tears and confession and desperate explanation all tangled together. There's a house. 20 minutes from here. Near the old mission school, you remember? Where we used to play as children. She wiped her face with shaking hands. Emika uses it for holding people. Before transport. It's quiet. Nobody goes there. And that's where they took my daughter? Yes. 2 men. They left before the fighting started. Emika wanted her secured somewhere safe, in case your husband's people came. Ruth processed this. The timeline made sense. If Ortensio's men had been watching the compound, they might not have seen the vehicle leave with Chima before the assault began. How do I know you're not leading me into another trap? Chemi's face crumpled. Because I'm done, Ruth. I'm done with all of it. Her voice broke. I thought if I just gave them information they'd leave me alone. I thought nobody would get hurt. I was stupid. Desperate. And now your parents are. My parents are what? Chemi hesitated. What Chemi? Your husband's men took them. During the fighting. I saw it. They pulled them out the back while everyone was distracted. They're safe. I hope. Relief flooded through Ruth, so intense it nearly buckled her knees. Her parents were out. Ortensio's men had them. But Chima was still missing. Take me to the house, Ruth said. Ruth, the men there, they're dangerous. If we go alone. I'm not going alone. I'm going with you. And you're going to help me get my daughter back. Chemi stared at her. Something shifted in her expression. Fear giving way to something else. Resolution maybe. Or penance. Okay, she whispered. Hey. I'll take you. They moved through the compound together. The fighting had died down. Bodies lay scattered, Emika's men mostly. Ruth didn't look too closely. Didn't want to count the dead. One of Ortensio's men found them near the perimeter wall. He was tall, broad, his face hard as granite. He raised his weapon when he saw Ruth, then lowered it. Mrs. Monaldo. Ruth almost laughed. No one had ever called her that before. Where's my husband? Being treated. The shoulder wound was clean. No artery, no bone. He'll live. The man's eyes moved to Chemi. Hardened. Who's this? My cousin. She's helping me find my daughter. The baby. The man's jaw tightened. We looked for her at the old woman's house. She wasn't there. The place was turned over. Signs of struggle. Ruth's stomach dropped. Mama and Kechi? Alive. Beaten but alive. He fought them. Gave them hell. A ghost of respect crossed his face. She told us 2 men took the child. Drove east. That's all she knew. Toward the old mission school. Chemi was telling the truth. I know where they took her, Ruth said. I need a vehicle. And backup. The man shook his head. We're stretched thin. The boss is down. 2 of our men are securing your parents at a safe location. I'm the only one left. Then you're coming with us. He looked at her. At the gun in her hand. At the blood on her clothes. At the steel in her eyes. Yes, ma'am. The drive took 18 minutes. Chemi directed them from the back seat. Left here, right there, past the old water tower, turn at the church with the collapsed roof. Ruth sat in the passenger seat, the gun in her lap, her eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. Her mind was a closed fist, clenched around a single thought. Chima. The man driving, his name was Marco, she'd learned, said nothing. His focus was absolute. Professional. They passed through sleeping villages. Empty roads. The world didn't know what was happening. The world didn't care. There. Chemi pointed. That road. It leads to the house. Marco killed the headlights. Slowed to a crawl. The house emerged from the darkness. A low concrete structure, single story, overgrown with bush. No lights visible. No movement. How many men? Marco asked. 2. Maybe 3. Chemi's voice was shaky. I'm not sure. Weapons. Machetes. One might have a gun. Marco nodded. Stopped the vehicle 50 meters from the house. Cut the engine. Silence. Ruth reached for the door handle. Marco's hand caught her arm. Wait. His voice was low. Let me go first. Clear the approach. My daughter is in there. And she needs her mother alive. Let me do my job. Ruth wanted to argue. Wanted to push past him, run to the house, tear down the door with her bare hands. But he was right. She knew he was right. 2 minutes, she said. Then I'm coming in. Marco nodded. Checked his weapon. Slipped out of the vehicle without a sound. Ruth watched him disappear into the darkness. 2 minutes. That's what she'd given him. 2 minutes to save her daughter. The first shot came 90 seconds later. Ruth was out of the vehicle before the echo faded. Ruth, wait, Chemi called behind her. Ruth didn't wait. She ran toward the house, gun raised, her twisted ankle screaming with every step. The pain was distant. Background noise. Nothing mattered except the door ahead. Another shot. A shout. The sound of something breaking. Ruth reached the front door. It was ajar, kicked in. He pushed through. The interior was dark. Cramped. A single hallway leading to rooms on either side. A body on the floor. One of Emika's men. Not moving. Ruth stepped over him. Kept moving. A room to the left. Door open. Marco grappling with another man. They crashed against a wall, struggled for control of a knife. Marco was stronger, but the other man was desperate. Ruth raised the gun. Couldn't get a clear shot. Then Marco twisted. Got leverage. Drove his elbow into the man's throat. The man dropped. Marco turned. So Ruth. Pointed down the hallway. End of the hall. Locked door. I couldn't get to it. Ruth ran. The door at the end was wooden. Heavy. A padlock secured it from the outside. Ruth shot the lock. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. The padlock shattered. The door swung open. Inside, darkness. The smell of sweat and fear. A small figure huddled in the corner. No, not a small figure. A woman. Holding a baby. The woman looked up. Her face was unfamiliar. Young, terrified, one of the girls Emeka had probably trafficked years ago and kept as a servant. But the baby in her arms. Chima. Ruth's legs gave out. She fell to her knees in the doorway, a sob tearing from her chest. Give her to me, she managed. Please. Give me my daughter. The woman didn't hesitate. She crossed the room, placed Chima in Ruth's arms, then retreated to the corner. Chima was crying. Small, hiccuping sobs that shook her tiny body. But she was alive. She was whole. She was here. Ruth held her daughter against her chest and let the tears come. I've got you, she whispered. Mama's got you. I've got you. They found Kemi outside the house. She was sitting on the ground, back against the wall, arms wrapped around her knees. She looked up as Ruth emerged. Chima in her arms, Marco behind her, the rescued woman trailing at a distance. You found her, Kemi said quietly. Ruth said nothing. Just looked at her cousin. The woman who had betrayed her. Who had endangered her family. Who had led them into a trap that nearly killed everyone she loved. But also, the woman who had told her where to find Chima. Who had come with her when she didn't have to. Who had chosen in the end to help. Ruth didn't know what to feel. Rage? Gratitude? Disgust? Forgiveness? All of it. None of it. Get up, she said finally. We're leaving. Kemi stood. Her eyes searched Ruth's face, looking for judgment, for absolution, for something. Ruth gave her nothing. Some wounds didn't heal overnight. Some betrayals couldn't be fixed with a single act of redemption. But Kemi had helped save Chima. That meant something. Not everything, but something. Come on, Ruth said. It's time to go home. Dawn broke over Enugu like a wound healing. Golden light spilled across the red earth, the green hills, the scattered rooftops of a city waking to another day. The violence of the night already fading into silence. Into secret. Into the kind of story that would only be whispered, never spoken aloud. Ruth sat in the back of the vehicle, Chima asleep against her chest, watching the world slide past the window. They were heading to the safe house, a small compound on the outskirts of the city that Ortensio's men had secured. Her parents were there. Ortensio was there. Everyone she loved gathered in one place. Everyone except the woman sitting beside her. Kemi hadn't spoken since they'd left the mission house. She sat with her hands in her lap, her eyes fixed on nothing, her body small and still. The tears had dried. What remained was something hollower. Ruth didn't know what to say to her. Didn't know if there was anything to say. So she said nothing. The safe house was modest. Concrete walls. Metal gate. A small courtyard with a single mango tree. The kind of place that looked like nothing from the outside, which was exactly the point. Marco pulled through the gate, which closed behind them immediately. Two men stood guard, Ortensio's people, rifles held with casual readiness. Ruth climbed out of the vehicle, Chima still in her arms. Her ankle throbbed. Her body ached. Every part of her screamed for rest. But she couldn't rest. Not yet. The front door opened. Ortensio stood in the doorway. His left arm was in a sling, the shoulder wound bandaged properly now. His face was pale, drawn with pain and exhaustion. But his eyes, when they found Ruth, when they found Chima, came alive. He crossed the courtyard in 3 strides. His good arm wrapped around them both, pulling them close, his face buried in Ruth's hair. She felt his body shaking. Felt the dampness against her scalp. He was crying. This man who had killed without flinching. Who had built empires on blood and silence. Who had never shown weakness to anyone. Crying. For her. For their daughter. I thought. His voice cracked. When they took you upstairs. When I heard the gunshot. I thought. I'm here. Ruth's voice was steady. Somehow. We're here. He pulled back. Looked at her face. The bruise on her cheek, the dried blood on her lip. The exhaustion carved into every line. You got out. On your own. I had help. His eyes moved past her. Found Kemi still sitting in the vehicle, not moving to get out. His expression hardened. Her. Yes. She's the one who. I know. Ruth touched his face. Drew his attention back to her. I know what she did. I know what she is. But she also told me where to find Chima. He came with me. She helped. That doesn't erase. No, it doesn't. But it's not nothing either. Ortensio's jaw tightened. She could see the war inside him, the part that wanted to drag Kemi from the vehicle, make her pay for every moment of fear, every drop of blood. Please, Ruth said quietly. Not now. Let me see my parents first. Let me hold our daughter. Let us breathe. And then we figure out what comes next. For a long moment Ortensio didn't move. Then he exhaled. Nodded. Hey. For now. He stepped aside. Let her pass. Ruth walked into the safe house, Chima warm against her chest, and finally let herself believe it was over. Her parents were in a back room. Emmanuel sat in a chair by the window, his face cleaned and bandaged, his one good eye focused on the door as Ruth entered. Ngozi lay on a small bed, propped up by pillows, her wounds dressed, her rosary clutched in her hands. They both looked up when Ruth appeared. Ngozi made a sound, half sob, half prayer, and reached out her arms. Ruth crossed the room, sat on the edge of the bed, placed Chima gently in her mother's arms. She's safe, Ruth said. We're all safe. Ngozi held her granddaughter like she was holding proof of God's existence. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling, really smiling, for the first time since Ruth had arrived in Nigeria. Chisholm, she whispered. By Chisholm. Good God. Good God. Emmanuel rose slowly from his chair, crossed to the bed, stood looking down at his wife, his granddaughter, his daughter. Then he sat beside Ruth, took her hand in his. You did this, he said quietly. You saved us. Ortensio and his men helped. But you walked into that room with Emeka. You fought your way out. You found your daughter. His grip tightened. You are stronger than I ever knew. Stronger than I ever taught you to be. Ruth's eyes burned. Papa. I was wrong. His voice cracked. All those years telling you that violence was weakness. That knowledge was enough. I was wrong. Sometimes you have to fight. Sometimes you have to become something you never wanted to be, to protect what you love. He looked toward the door. Toward the hallway where Ortensio waited. Your husband. He is not what I expected. I know. He is dangerous. Violent. A man with blood on his hands. Yes. Emmanuel was quiet for a moment. Then, he is also a man who would die for you. Who walked into hell to bring us home. Who held his daughter like she was made of glass. He turned back to Ruth. I cannot approve of what he is. But I can see what he feels. And I can see what you feel. What are you saying, Papa? Emmanuel squeezed her hand. I'm saying that love is complicated. That good people sometimes do terrible things for the right reasons. That I don't understand your world, but I don't need to understand it to see that you belong together. Ruth couldn't speak. The tears came hot, overwhelming, releasing something she'd been holding for years. Her father pulled her close. Held her like he had when she was a child. Like he could protect her from everything. I'm proud of you, he whispered. My daughter. My brilliant, fierce, impossible daughter. I'm so proud of you. Later, hours later, after food and rest and the slow unwinding of terror, Ruth found Ortensio on the small veranda at the back of the house. He sat in a plastic chair, his injured arm resting carefully, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun was beginning its descent. The day had passed in a blur of recovery and quiet. Now evening approached, and with it decisions that couldn't be delayed. Ruth sat beside him, took his hand. How's the shoulder? Hurts. He almost smiled. But I've had worse. Liar. Maybe. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the light change, breathing the same air. Emeka, Ruth said finally. What happened to him? Ortensio's expression didn't change. My men found him unconscious in his office. The blow to the head, yours I assume, cracked his skull. He's alive. Barely. What will you do with him? Ortensio turned to look at her. What do you want me to do? Ruth considered the question. Thought about everything Emeka represented. The girls he'd trafficked. The lives he'd destroyed. The fear he'd caused. The way he'd looked at her like she was inventory. I want him to suffer, she said quietly. I want him to feel what those girls felt. What my parents felt. What I felt all those years ago when I realized I was about to be sold. She paused. But I also want to be done. I want to go home. I want to hold my daughter and sleep next to my husband and never think about this place again. Those two things might not be compatible. I know. Ortensio was quiet for a long moment. Then, there are authorities here. Legitimate ones, not the police but federal agencies. Anti-trafficking units. They've been trying to build a case against Emeka's network for years. They've never had enough evidence. And now we have everything. The compound. The records. The survivors. The bodies. His jaw tightened. I can hand him over. Let the system do what it's supposed to do. It won't be as satisfying as... He stopped. As what you would normally do, Ruth finished. Yes. She looked at him. At this man she loved. This man who had killed for her. Who would kill again if she asked. Do it the right way, she said. Hand him over. Let him rot in a prison instead of a grave. Let the world know what he did. Ortensio studied her face. You're sure? No. Ruth exhaled. But I'm trying to be something better. We both are. And that means doing it the hard way even when the easy way feels more satisfying. He was silent for a long moment. Then he lifted her hand to his lips. Kissed her knuckles. The right way. The arrangements took 2 days. Ortensio's connections, even in Nigeria, even diminished from his former reach, were enough to contact the right people. Federal agents. International organizations. People who had been hunting Emeka's network for years and now finally had what they needed. Ruth didn't participate in the meetings. Didn't want to. She spent those 2 days with her parents and her daughter, recovering in the small safe house, letting her body heal and her mind settle. But she was there when they took Emeka away. He was conscious now barely. His head wrapped in bandages, his wrists in cuffs, his empty eyes finally showing something like fear. They brought him through the courtyard on a stretcher, federal agents flanking him, cameras recording everything. Ruth stood in the doorway, Chima in her arms. Emeka's eyes found her. Held. She said nothing. Did nothing. Just watched as they loaded him into a vehicle. As the doors closed. As the convoy pulled away. Then she turned, walked back inside and closed the door on that chapter of her life. That evening Ortensio found her in the small room where Chima slept. She was standing over the makeshift crib, watching her daughter's chest rise and fall, counting breaths like they were precious. He came up behind her. Wrapped his good arm around her waist. Rested his chin on her shoulder. It's done, he said quietly. Emeka is in federal custody. His network is dismantled. The girls they were holding have been transferred to a rehabilitation center. Ruth nodded. Didn't speak. There's something else. She turned her head. Looked at him. The woman who was holding Chima at the mission house. The one who gave her to you. What about her? She was trafficked. 8 years ago. Been with Emeka's operation ever since. Ortensio paused. She wants to go home. To her family. But she has nothing. No money. No documents. No way to get there. Ruth understood. Help her. Already done. He pressed a kiss to her temple. She flies home to Cameroon next week. New documents. Money to start over. I thought you'd want to know. Ruth turned fully. Wrapped her arms around him. Held on. Thank you. For what? For being who you are. For fighting for us. For trying to be better. He held her tighter. I'm not better. Not yet. Maybe not ever. You're trying. That's enough. They stood like that for a long time. Holding each other. Listening to their daughter breathe. Then Ruth pulled back. Looked at his face. I want to go home. Connecticut. Yes. But first, she glanced toward the door. Toward the room where her parents were resting. I want them to come with us. At least for a while. I want them to see where we live. To meet Zia Lucia. To be a family. Ortensio smiled. That rare, real smile that made him look younger. Softer. Human. I already asked them. Ruth blinked. What? Your father said he'd never been on an airplane before. Your mother said she'd always wanted to see snow. His smile widened. They said yes. Ruth laughed. The sound surprised her. Bright and real and full of something she'd almost forgotten existed. Joy. Then let's go home. The flight to America was long. 16 hours. 2 layovers. A journey that felt like crossing between worlds. Because it was. Ruth sat by the window, Chima asleep in her lap, watching the clouds roll beneath them like an endless white sea. Beside her, Ortensio dozed, his injured shoulder propped carefully against a pillow, his hand resting on her knee even in sleep. Across the aisle her parents sat together. Emmanuel stared out his window with the wide-eyed wonder of a man seeing the sky from above for the first time. His hand pressed against the glass like he could touch the clouds. Every few minutes he would turn to Ngozi and whisper something, pointing at a formation, a color, a shift in the light. Ngozi clutched her rosary in one hand and her husband's arm in the other. She was terrified. Ruth could see it in the tight set of her jaw, the way her lips moved in constant silent prayer. But she was also determined. She'd survived traffickers and violence and nearly losing her family. A metal tube hurtling through the sky was nothing compared to that. Ruth watched them. These two people who had raised her. Who had sacrificed everything for her education, her dreams, her future. Who had nearly died because of choices she'd made. And who were now flying to another continent to be part of her life. Something swelled in Ruth's chest. Gratitude. Love. The overwhelming sense that despite everything, despite the darkness, the danger, the impossible odds, she had been given more than she deserved. Chima stirred. Made a small sound. Settled again. Ruth pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead. Almost there, baby girl, she whispered. Almost home. Connecticut in early spring was a revelation. The trees were budding, pale green shoots emerging from winter bare branches. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of thawing earth and something floral Ruth couldn't name. The sky stretched wide and blue, unmarked by the dust and humidity of Nigeria. Emmanuel stepped out of the car at Zia Lucia's cottage and stood perfectly still. He looked at the stone walls, the green shutters, the garden just beginning to wake from winter, the old trees standing guard around the property. "This is where you live?" he asked quietly. "This is where we're staying," Ruth said, "while we figure out what comes next." It's... He searched for words. Quiet. Yes. Peaceful. Yes. He turned to look at her. His one good eye, the swelling had gone down but the bruise remained, was bright with something Ruth couldn't quite read. "You found peace," he said. "After everything. You found peace." Ruth took his hand. "I'm still finding it. Every day. But yes, I think I have." The front door opened. Zia Lucia appeared in the doorway. She was smaller than Ruth remembered. Older. But her eyes were the same, sharp and warm and missing nothing. She wore a simple dress, a cardigan against the spring chill, and an expression of barely contained emotion. She looked at Ruth. Chima. At Ortensio with his arm in a sling. Then her eyes moved to Emmanuel and Ngozi. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Zia Lucia descended the steps, faster than a woman her age should move, and walked directly to Ngozi. She took the other woman's hands in hers. Held them tight. "You are Ruth's mother," she said. Her English was accented but clear. "Yes." Ngozi's voice was uncertain. "Then you are my sister." He pulled Ngozi into a hug. Fierce. Uncompromising. The kind of embrace that left no room for awkwardness or formality. Ngozi stiffened, then softened. Then held on. When they finally separated, both women were crying. "Come inside," Zia Lucia said, wiping her eyes. "I've made food. Too much food. You'll eat until you're sick and then you'll eat more. That's how it works in this house." He turned to Emmanuel. Studied him with those sharp eyes. "You're the teacher. The one who raised this brilliant girl." "I am." "Good. Then you can help me with the crossword puzzles. Ortensio is useless at them." Emmanuel blinked. Then, for the first time since Ruth had arrived in Nigeria, he laughed. Real laugh. Full and warm and surprised out of him by this tiny Italian woman who spoke to him like they'd known each other for years. "I would be honored," he said. Zia Lucia nodded, satisfied. Then she took his arm, proprietary like she'd claimed him already, and led him inside. Ngozi followed, still wiping her eyes, already asking about the garden. Ruth stood in the driveway, Chima in her arms, and watched her worlds merge. Ortensio came up beside her. His good arm slipped around her waist. "She likes them," he said. "She hasn't even talked to my father for 5 minutes. Doesn't matter. I can tell." He paused. "She's already planning how to feed them for the rest of their lives." Ruth laughed. Leaned into him. "Is this real? Is what real? This. All of it. My parents here. Our daughter safe. Emeka in prison. Us, standing in front of this house like nothing tried to kill us 2 weeks ago. Ortensio turned her to face him. His hand cupped her cheek. It's real. Every part of it. It doesn't feel real. I know. Give it time. He kissed her forehead. Eventually the peace will feel normal. Eventually you'll stop waiting for the other shoe to drop. Is that what happened to you? He was quiet for a moment. No, he admitted. I still wait for it. Every day. But the waiting gets quieter. And the good moments get louder. Ruth looked at him. At this man who had built empires on blood. Who had walked away from everything he knew for her. Who was still learning, still trying, still becoming. I love you, she said. I know. Say it back. He smiled. That rare smile she'd only seen a handful of times. I love you, Ruth Obi Minaldo. More than I knew I was capable of loving anything. She kissed him. Soft, slow, full of everything words couldn't carry. Then she took his hand, shifted Chima to her other arm and walked into the cottage. Home. The days that followed were quiet. Ruth had almost forgotten what quiet felt like. What it meant to wake without fear. To eat breakfast without checking the doors. To watch her daughter play without scanning for threats. But slowly, day by day, the tension began to unknot. Her parents settled into the cottage like they belonged there. Emmanuel spent hours in Zia Lucia's library, marveling at books he'd only read about. Ngozi took over the kitchen, teaching Lucia how to make jollof rice while Lucia taught her the secrets of osso buco. They communicated in broken English, hand gestures and laughter, and somehow understood each other perfectly. Ortensio healed. The sling came off after 2 weeks. The color returned to his face. He started taking walks with Emmanuel, long, slow circuits around the property, talking about things Ruth wasn't privy to. Father and husband. 2 men finding common ground. And Chima grew. She was 5 months old now. Discovering her hands, her voice, the way light danced through windows. She smiled at everyone, but she smiled widest for Ruth. For the mother who had walked through fire to bring her home. One evening, Ruth sat on the porch watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, the kind of colors that looked impossible, like someone had spilled watercolors across the horizon. The air was cool but not cold. The first fireflies of the season were beginning to emerge. Ortensio sat beside her. Chima was inside with her grandparents, being passed between them like a precious treasure. I talked to your father today, Ortensio said. Ruth turned. About what? About you. About us. About what happens next. What did he say? Ortensio was quiet for a moment. Then. He said he spent his whole life preparing you for a world he understood. Education. Knowledge. The belief that intelligence could overcome anything. He paused. He said he was wrong. Not about intelligence but about the world. He didn't prepare you for the world that exists. The one with men like Emeka. Like Victor Ashford. Like me. You're nothing like them. I'm closer than you want to believe. Ruth reached for his hand. Held it. You're not. You never were. Ortensio looked at their joined hands. He asked me a question. Your father. What question? He asked if I would die for you. Ruth's breath caught. What did you say? I said yes. Without hesitation. He turned to face her. But then he asked me something harder. He asked if I would live for you. If I would choose the long, difficult path of being a good man instead of the short, easy path of being a powerful one. And Ortensio's eyes were bright. Vulnerable in a way she'd rarely seen. I said I would try. That I've been trying. That every day I wake up and choose you, choose this life, over the one I left behind. He swallowed. He said that was the right answer. He said trying was enough. As long as I never stopped. Ruth felt tears prick her eyes. My father said that? He also said if I ever hurt you he'd find a way to kill me himself. Even if it took him the rest of his life. Ruth laughed, wet and overwhelmed and full of love. That sounds more like him. I believed him. Ortensio's lips twitched. Your father is terrifying. He's a retired teacher. Exactly. You know how much patience that requires. The man has been planning revenge scenarios for decades. He's just waiting for the right moment. Ruth laughed again, leaned into him. Let him hold her as the last light faded from the sky. 3 weeks after they arrived, Ruth took her mother for a walk. Just the two of them. Down the long driveway, past the stone walls, along the quiet road that wound through the Connecticut countryside. Ngozi walked slowly, still adjusting to the cooler climate, still marveling at how green everything was. In Nigeria, she said, green means the rains have come. Here green means something else. I don't know what. It means spring, Ruth said. New beginnings. Ngozi nodded. Thoughtful. They walked in silence for a while. Comfortable silence. The kind that only exists between people who have nothing left to hide. Then Ngozi spoke. Your cousin. Kemi. Ruth's step faltered. Just for a moment. What about her? I've been thinking about her. About what she did. About why. Ruth said nothing. Waited. When you were children, Ngozi continued, you and Kemi were like sisters. Inseparable. Everyone said you would both go far. Both of you brilliant, both of you determined. And then I left. And then you left. Ngozi sighed. And Kemi stayed. Watched you go. Watched everyone celebrate your scholarship, your opportunity, your escape. And she stayed. That doesn't excuse what she did. No. It doesn't. Ngozi stopped walking. Turned to face Ruth. But it explains it. She was drowning, Ruth. In debt, in fear, in a life that had become a cage. And when she saw you, successful, wealthy, free, something broke inside her. She almost got us killed. She almost got Chima. Ruth couldn't finish the sentence. Ngozi took her daughter's hands. I know. I know what she did. I know what she almost cost us. Her eyes were steady. But I also know what it feels like to be trapped. To make choices you're not proud of because you can't see any other way. Are you saying I should forgive her? I'm saying forgiveness is not about her. It's about you. Ngozi squeezed her hands. You can carry this anger forever. Let it poison you. Let it define you. Or you can set it down. Not for Kemi's sake, for yours. Ruth looked at her mother. At this woman who had survived so much. Who had been beaten and held captive and threatened with horrors Ruth couldn't imagine. And who was now talking about forgiveness. How? Ruth whispered. How do you let go of something like that? You don't let go all at once. You let go a little at a time. Every day you choose to carry a little less. Until one day you realize the weight is gone. Ngozi's eyes softened. It takes time. It takes work. But it's possible. I know because I've done it. When your father and I first married. His family, they didn't approve of me. They made my life difficult for years. Said things. Did things. She shook her head. I hated them. For a long time. But eventually I realized the hatred was hurting me more than it was hurting them. So I let it go. Not for them, for me. Ruth absorbed this. Let it settle. I don't know if I can forgive Kemi. Then don't. Not today. Not tomorrow. But leave the door open. That's all I'm asking. Ruth looked at the road ahead. At the trees budding with new life. At the world continuing despite everything that had tried to end it. I'll try, she said finally. I'll try. Ngozi smiled. Pulled her close. That's all any of us can do. The morning her parents left, Ruth cried. She'd known this day was coming. They couldn't stay forever. They had a life in Nigeria, a home, a community. They'd already extended their visit twice, citing various excuses that fooled no one. But now the bags were packed. The tickets were booked. The car was waiting to take them to the airport. Emmanuel stood in the driveway looking back at the cottage like he was memorizing it. I never imagined, he said quietly. When I was a young teacher in Enugu, dreaming of what my children might become, I never imagined this. Imagined what, Papa? This. He gestured at the cottage. At Ortensio, who stood nearby with Chima in his arms. At Zia Lucia, who was pressing containers of food into Ngozi's hands despite her protests. A family that spans continents. A daughter who survived the impossible. A granddaughter who carries two worlds in her blood. He turned to Ruth. His eyes were bright. I'm so proud of you. I don't say it enough. But I am. Every day. Proud and amazed and grateful. Ruth hugged him. Held on. Come back soon, she whispered. We will. Try to stop us. Ngozi approached next. Her arms already open. My baby. My brilliant, fierce baby. Mama. Let me say this. Ngozi cupped Ruth's face in her hands. You are everything I prayed for. Everything I dreamed. And more, so much more than I could have imagined. I love you, Mama. I love you too. Now go, live your life. Raise that beautiful child. Love that complicated man of yours. And call me every week. You hear? Every week. Yes, Mama. One more hug. Longer. Tighter. Then Ngozi turned to Ortensio. She studied him for a long moment. This man who had killed for her daughter. Who had walked through hell to save her family. Who stood now with a baby in his arms and love in his eyes. Take care of them, she said simply. With my life. I know. She reached up, patted his cheek. You're a good man, Ortensio. Somewhere under all that intensity, there's a good man. I'm trying to find him. You will. You have Ruth to help you. She smiled. And now you have us too. She kissed Chima's forehead. Whispered a prayer over her granddaughter. Then she walked to the car, Emmanuel following, both of them looking back every few steps. The car pulled away. Ruth stood in the driveway watching until it disappeared around the bend. Then Ortensio was beside her. Chima between them. They'll be back, he said. I know. And we'll visit them. In Nigeria. When things are settled. I know. She leaned into him. Let his arm wrap around her. It's strange, she said quietly. What is? For so long I thought I had to choose. Nigeria or America. My past or my future. My family or my own life. She looked up at him. But I don't have to choose. I can have both. All of it. Yes. That feels impossible. Impossible. At the same time. Ortensio kissed the top of her head. That's what miracles feel like. That night, after Chima was asleep, Ruth sat on the porch with Zia Lucia. The old woman had been quiet all day, observing as she always did but saying little. Now in the stillness of the evening she finally spoke. You've changed. Ruth looked at her. Since Nigeria. Since everything. Lucia's eyes were kind but direct. Something is different in you. Good different or bad different? Just different. Stronger maybe. Saturday. But also, more whole. She reached over, patted Ruth's hand. You faced the thing that broke you. And you survived. That changes a person. Ruth considered this. I don't feel stronger. Oh, sighed. Like I've been running for years and I've finally stopped, but my body doesn't know how to rest yet. That's normal. Rest takes practice. Peace takes practice. Lucia smiled. You'll learn. You have time now. Do I? Yes. The old woman's voice was firm. Emeka is gone. Victor Ashford is dead. The network is destroyed. Your family is safe. Your daughter is healthy. Your husband loves you more than he knows how to say. She squeezed Ruth's hand. You have time, Ruth. Use it. Ruth felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you. For everything. For taking me in. For accepting me. For being. Family. Yes. Lucia waved a hand. You don't thank family. Family just is. She stood, stretched, pressed a kiss to Ruth's forehead. Now go to bed. Tomorrow we start teaching you how to make real Italian food. None of that American nonsense. Real food. Ruth laughed. Yes, Zia. The old woman went inside. Ruth stayed on the porch a moment longer. Looking at the stars. Listening to the silence. Then she rose, went inside, climbed the stairs to the room where her husband and daughter slept. Ortensio was on his side, Chima tucked in her crib beside the bed. The moonlight fell across them both, silver and soft and gentle. Ruth slipped into bed beside him. His arm found her waist immediately, pulling her close, his breath warm against her neck. You okay? He murmured, half asleep. Yes. Good. She closed her eyes. Let the warmth of him surround her. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she fell asleep without fear. Some journeys don't end where you expect. Ruth Obi left Nigeria with a scholarship and a dream. She found betrayal, survival, love, violence, and finally, peace. Not the peace of silence. Not the peace of forgetting. But the peace that comes from facing the worst and choosing to keep living anyway. She learned that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about what you do after you've shattered. How you pick up the pieces. How you decide which ones to keep and which ones to leave behind. She learned that family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up, who stay, who hold you together when you can't hold yourself. She learned that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's not even about the other person. It's about choosing to set down a weight that was never yours to carry. And she learned that home isn't a place. It's not Nigeria or America, Boston or Connecticut. Home is the people who see you, really see you, and love you anyway. Ortensio Monaldo was a killer. A mafia boss. A man with blood on his hands and darkness in his past. But he was also a man who chose to change. Who walked away from power because he loved someone more than he loved control. Who kept trying every day to be better than he was the day before. That's not redemption. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it's something. Something worth believing in. Thanks for staying with me through this one. Ruth and Ortensio's story wasn't easy. It was dark and heavy and full of the kind of pain that doesn't heal quickly. But it was also full of love. The fierce, complicated, impossible kind of love that makes you believe people can change. That families can be rebuilt. That peace is possible even after war. If you felt something watching this, if any moment stayed with you, I'd love to hear about it. Drop a comment below. Tell me which part hit the hardest. Tell me where you're watching from tonight. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. There are more stories coming. Different stories. But all of them told the way you deserve to hear them. With care, with honesty, with respect for the journey. I'll see you in the next one.